Welcome back everybody, my name is Philip and today we will do some HDR photo editing using Aurora HDR and Photoshop. And essentially that means we're going to go from this zero exposure image to that final image in just a couple of minutes. So let's run the intro and then jump right in. Okay, if you have never heard of HDR before or HDR photography before, do not worry about it. I have linked in the description of this video a very elaborate article plus video that explains everything there is to know about what HDR is, how you can do it, what do you need, and yada yada. So if you're interested, head down to the link in the description and have a look. Also, I'm using the Aurora HDR software in this particular video. You don't need this specific software, you just need any HDR software to do what I'm doing right here. But I do recommend Aurora HDR, and if you want to have 10% off, use the promo code Let's Image and the link in the description. Now, let's jump into Aurora and see what we can do. As it is an HDR image, we need 3 images with different exposures that we can combine into one single image. And here are the 3 images that we're going to use today. First, we have the 0 exposure image, then we have the -2 exposure image, and then the +2 exposure. So we're going to just simply select these 3 all together and then drag and drop them into Aurora. Now Aurora is going to think how to best combine them, but before it does that, we have to explain the software. Are the photos handheld, right? So have I taken the different exposures by hand, in which case we want to hit that alignment button in the lower left right here. And also there is a person. Now if you were just to take these 3 images and put them on top of each other, there's a high danger that this person, because she's moving or he's moving, will be on 3 separate positions in my final image. I don't want that, I just want one person which doesn't look goofy. So in that case, we're just going to go to the settings in the lower left right here, and we're going to hit the ghost reduction button. Perfect, let's hit the create HDR button and let's just give it a couple of seconds to merge that image into a nice HDR version. And here we go. So even if we have a look at the before and after without even touching any of the settings yet, then we can already see a drastic difference between the original 0 exposure and the final HDR, which resulted of these 3 images being merged together. Now I always find this very incredible to see such a big difference if you just put a little bit of HDR love into your photos. Cool, so what I want to do is I want to essentially spice it up. When I was there in Positano in Italy, the scene changed quite quickly. So it went from grey, just a rainy, not so really beautiful day, to an incredible purple in like 2 minutes, and I had never ever seen this in my life before. Now you might think it's a bit over the top, but I want to recreate what I felt when I was actually there. That's why I'm doing photography, and that's why I edit my pictures. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pump up these purples really hard, and just make sure that this city, Positano itself, which is beautifully on that mountainside there, is pretty visible. Now, we're going to start a little bit in Aurora HDR, and then we're just going to finalize it just a little bit in Photoshop as well. So let's start getting to know Aurora HDR, and we could use the presets that are down here, and some of them are pretty good, but for today, we don't have to do that, because the editing, believe it or not, is actually quite easy today. Now, what I'm always doing is first, let's create a new layer, right? So let's hit the plus button in the top right corner, create a new adjustment layer, and let's work on these colors a little bit. If I simply increase the saturation to something like, well, let's say something like that, we have already brought out these purples way more than they were before. So that's before and that's after. And I hope you can see that, especially on the left-hand side right here, the purple really starts to shine a bit more. That's good, because that's exactly what we want. So I want to make sure that I only have this in the sort of center part of the image and not anywhere else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the brush button on the top right hand corner, and here I'm going to go to radial mask. Now let's hit that, and now we can drag in where we want to have the adjustment. Let me see. I have to invert it so that it's actually visible within that circle. And I just want it to be visible somewhere around here. We can also make that a little bit thinner, maybe to something like that, and really place it somewhere here that the colors are pumpy there. Perfect. Let's have a look if we have increased it enough or if we need to increase it a bit more, but I think that is already not too bad. Awesome. Let's hit the done button here. And the second thing that I want to do in Aurora HDR, and then we're already done for this part, is I want to increase the exposure slightly. So I'm going to go to the exposure setting here. I'm just going to pump it up to something like that. Awesome. Now that I have that, I take the brush symbol, click on brush this time. I'm going to get my brush nice and large to something like that maybe. The opacity to 80% or something like that. And now I'm going to paint in where I want to have this exposure adjustment to be visible, which is only in the city area right here, or town area rather. Awesome, let's have a look at the before and after, and that definitely puts some attention on that particular beautiful, by the way, town. Awesome, so let's zoom out, have a look at the global before and after, or we can also use the slider, which I like a lot, and we can go before and after. So already a very drastic, simple and fast change, and now we're going to finalize this particular image in Photoshop. The way to do that is extremely simple. We're just going to go to File and then Open in, and here we select Photoshop. Now it's going to raster that image and it's going to pump it over to Photoshop, and we're just going to wait for that to happen. And here we are in Photoshop. Now from here we're going to work on the colors and the light a little bit. It's going to be super fun and super easy because we're going to use simple techniques, but they're going to make a massive difference. Let's do this. So first we're going to start out with a hue saturation layer. I did mention before that I want to bring back essentially all these colors, right? All the purple that's not there really anymore. And we can actually easily do that. Now I'm going to use the hue saturation layer. I'm going to hit the colorize button, and it's going to colorize my image. I'm going to find a nice purple, maybe something like this will look nice. We can always change that later if we want to, but for now, that doesn't look bad. I'll take that. We can also increase the saturation if we want to, but I think this will be far too crazy. So let's leave it somewhere around here. Awesome. Now, what I'm going to do is first, I'm going to reduce the opacity because that is obviously far too strong. So I'm going to reduce the opacity to something like, say, something like 60% for now. And I'm going to hit Command, or if you're on the Windows, Ctrl+I on my keyboard to invert that and hide it. So now it's like nothing happened, and now I want to bring the effect back in wherever I feel like it's welcome. And I would like to have this particular color, especially in the clouds, because those were the ones that were really purple. So I'm going to make a massive brush, and I'm just going to tap it in with maybe an opacity of 40%. I'm going to go ahead and bring this color change into the clouds. Just ever so slightly and careful, and we can always remove it if we feel like we go over the top somewhere. It's no problem at all. So let's tap that in a little bit here and not too much over there. Let's also make it a bit smaller and just down here. Okay, maybe a bit more here. And let's give the corner a little bit as well. Nice. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. I like that. Okay. Awesome, so now we have the color in there. I'm going to reduce my opacity to 20% now, and I'm also going to tap it into the city, because otherwise it's weird if the rest of the image doesn't have the feeling of the main color in the image. It's kind of a bit odd. And with an opacity of 20%, I'm also just going to give it one dash to the beach area right here. Awesome, so now we have a bit of purple in the image, and as I said, if we feel like, we just go back and change the color. But I think this particular color is actually quite nice, and we can keep it. Now the next thing we're going to do is, you obviously see there is light coming from here, but it's not really visible as it is right now. What I want to do is I want to put attention on that particular area. So we're going to do that by using another hue saturation layer. I'm going to hit the colorize button again, believe it or not, crank up the saturation to something like that, and go into a really nice orange. Maybe something like this. Now, you would think this kind of defeats the purpose because we have just added purple, so why would we go and The thing is, I can make it so that it's only visible in this particular area. So, first of all, let's reduce our brush size here. And I only want this to be visible. I only want the orange to be visible, where in my image I have a mix, or let's say a mid-tone, and something not black, but also something not white. And for that, we can go ahead and double-click on the layer, and just simply use the blend if function of Photoshop. Love that stuff, you'll love it as well. So what we're going to say is, first, we're going to hit Alt on the keyboard and split this thing apart. I'm going to drag it all the way to the left-hand side, and that will make it so that in the really bright areas, this color is now only fuzzy visible, let's say. And then I'm going to take my blacks here and drag them over to the point where I realize, okay, we are reaching the sky. So something like that. And then I'm going to split that one, and I'm going to drag it over as well. Something like that. Awesome. Let's hit the OK button right here. And once we have that, it's kind of a cool effect, but it doesn't look really good. So let's click on that layer mask, hit Command or Control and I to hide the effect again, and get a nice brush. And with an opacity of say 20%, I'm just going to start to tap that into different areas of my image. Make it a bit smaller maybe, like that. Okay, so what we're doing here, we're going to add some dynamic, some color dynamic if you want, to our image. And here we go. So it's a subtle change, but it will come out just nice in just a moment. So if I switch that off and on, you can definitely see now we have some more reddish color in this particular light area right here. Awesome. So let's go from here, and what I'm going to do now sounds kind of weird, but first we're going to decrease the brightness, and then we're going to increase the brightness again. Let me show you what I mean. We're going to grab a simple curve adjustment layer, and we're going to bring it down. Let's bring it down until we have the feeling that the colors are nice. Maybe to something, and the light of course, maybe to something like that. Yeah, that's not bad. I kind of like that. Now, once we have that, I have to decide where I want this to be visible. And for me, it's especially the sky. The clouds were so dramatic and I want to get that back. So as usual, I'm going to hit Command or Ctrl+I, hide the effect, and now either with a large brush or with a gradient tool, you can really decide what you want to use for that. I'm just going to start and tap that in wherever I feel like it would look nice, which is in the sky for me. So I'm going to go ahead and tap the different areas that I want to be darker. Also a little bit of the foreground maybe, now that I see it right away. Might as well hit two birds with one stone. Okay, I'm going to tap away. I'll bring you guys back in a second. Perfect, so now we have a little bit of a darker sky. Now I'm going to do the inverse. Now I'm going to increase the brightness. I'm going to grab a new curve adjustment layer, and I'm only going to grab the highlights and drag it towards the left. So I'm only making the bright parts brighter. So let's see. Well, the way I grab it, I make everything brighter, but I'm working on the highlight button, let's say, or the highlight part of the curve. So let's drag that towards the left-hand side until this blob here in the very center of my image, or the sky center, is become nice and bright. Maybe something like this. That looks good. I like that. Perfect. Now, of course, I have increased the overall brightness of the image a little bit as well, but actually I don't mind that. I'm going to keep that for now. So let's continue from here, and what we're going to do is nearly done. We're going to hit another hue saturation layer. We're going to increase the saturation because I want to bring these colors out way more than they currently are. So let's drag that to something like this maybe. Yeah, that looks good. I like that a lot. And let's do the usual thing. Hit Command and I on the keyboard, grab brush and brush it in wherever I feel like it's necessary. And I like this color increase, especially here in this bright area. Okay, so I'm going to tap it in ever so slightly just there. Perfect. Ah, beautiful. Let's have a look at the before and the after. And also, remember how we put this orange in? If the orange would not be there, I'm going to switch it off now. You'll see how the colors in the sky, let's zoom in here a little bit, how the colors in the sky just become, let's say, more uniform purple, but having this tiny bit of extra touch of color just sort of adds a bit of dynamic to the colors themselves and makes the whole scene, for me at least, more interesting. Okay, I'm liking this a lot, and now there's not much left to do. What we can do is grab another curve adjustment layer, drag it up, hit the Command and I button, and so to hide the effect, I'm just going to tap that into the side of that particular town here, of Positano. Beautiful. Just like that, just to make sure there is enough attention on that. Yeah, that is looking good. And now if we wanted to, but that's really your personal taste, we can add a little bit of a vignette. So in theory, we can either do it manually, but today we're not. We're just going to hit Command or Control, Alt, Shift and E on your keyboard, which will copy everything that we have just done, all the adjustments and everything that's visible onto a new layer that I have now in my lower right-hand corner right here. That's called a stamp visible. And now with that, we can go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And here we can do a couple of things if we wanted to. For instance, we can drag it more into the purple, but it just makes it look more cold. I don't think I'll dig that for now. Let's just leave that off. But what we want to do is we want to jump over to, where is it? Here, the post-crop vignetting. So I'm just going to drag that into a nice dark vignette to something like that. Something like that doesn't look bad. Let's leave it there. We're going to increase the feathering a little bit. Maybe we can drag it back a little bit. Something like that. That's especially needed for the foreground. I'm going to hit the OK button. And now what I'll do, I'm going to grab a curve adjustment layer and drag it up. I'm going to drag it up to something like this. And I'm going to hit, how do we do it the best? We can use the blend diff or we could tap it in. Let's tap it in. Let's hit Command or Control and I. Get a nice large brush. I'm just going to bring that brightness out in the very center of my image, including a little bit of the foreground. Yeah, that looks nice. I'm liking that. Okay, let's bring the foreground a little bit here as well. And actually, let's reduce the blackness here a little bit, just in the foreground area here, because there are some nice footprints in the sand. I kind of like that they're visible. Okay, that looks nice. And let me see, do we have to do anything else? I think that's actually quite okay. Let's have a look at the overall before and after of Photoshop. So that's the before and that is the after. The before and the after. Yeah, I like that. Oh no, actually we can do one or two more things. Let's do it just because it rounds up the image nicely. The first thing is we're going to go and create another stamp visible. So we're going to hit Command or Control, Alt, Shift and E on the keyboard. If I activate my Photoshop, it's going to work. And with that, we're going to quickly go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and now we're going to concentrate on the buildings here. So let's go into them a little bit, and I'm only going to increase the clarity. And increasing the clarity really brings out a lot of this nice detail and like it's sort of a mini contrast in the area right there. So I'm going to crank that up to something like that. I'm going to hit the OK button because I love it. Now, once we have that, I'm going to drop a layer mask on that thing and hide it. So now I'm going to bring that into only this particular area with an opacity of, say, whatever, 40%. Just going to tap a couple of times just to get this nice mini contrast or clarity into the image. Maybe I should also paint with white because then we can actually see the effect in the picture. Super useful. Okay, now that we have that, let's have a quick look before and after. Yeah, it sort of makes the city or the town pop a little bit more, which I actually like a lot. Now, lastly, just for the clouds up here, we're going to create a soft Orton effect. So we're going to do just like before, a stamp visible. So we're going to hit Command or Control, Alt, Shift and E. We're going to change the blend mode to soft light. And with that, I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. And here we're going to have to select, and I'm only looking at the clouds right now. I want to make them look a little bit softer. Okay, so we can either go with a look that looks like that, or we can go with a look that looks like that. That is kind of cool. It has a very nice light to it, but I wonder what we like more. Maybe something in between. Maybe something like that. Let's hit the OK button and just simply switch that off and on again. I also like what it does with the colors. That's kind of nice. Okay, so we're going to bring this into the image, but just a little bit. That's obviously far too much. So I'm going to drop a layer mask, hide the effect, get my massive brush. And there are many ways to bring stuff into the image, but I'm going to stick with what we have done today. So I'm going to bring that in to the image just ever so slightly in these areas right here. Make the brush a bit smaller, bring it in down here and up here. Okay, I don't want to bring it too much into the area here because it sort of looks weird with this sort of bright town under it. It creates too much of a contrast. So I'm going to leave that just like that. And now I can select the layer and just drop the opacity. And we want to bring it to maybe something like, just something like 40%. I think that's already quite enough. Just to bring out the sort of soft clouds a bit more, just a bit, it doesn't need much. Awesome. So having done that, let's have a look at the complete before and after. Again, before and after, and before and after, and before and after. I'm liking this a lot. Awesome. Now remember, Photoshop as well as photography itself is your playground. You don't have to do what I'm doing, but you don't have to go crazy on the colors like I do. You don't have to go crazy on the lights like I do. You can do whatever you please. But if you create like me, then this is kind of a way to do it if you're interested. Also, if you do use Aurora HDR or Photoshop or any other editing program, or you're just simply interested in photography, we now have our own Facebook community where I gladly invite you to join just to share your work, get criticism if you ask for it, and also get some tutorials going or post some yourself. Don't forget, the link is down there in the description as well. Other than that, I hope you did like the video. If you did like the video, do not forget to hit the thumbs up button. And also, do not forget to subscribe. It's going to help me out a lot. Other than that, happy editing, happy photographing, get out there, take your mind off things, and just keep shooting and editing until you're totally happy and a pro. I shall see you the next time. Take care. Bye.